Welcome to the Connected Instructor Podcast. I'm your host, Landon Michaelson, and today we're diving deep into the world of golf performance and physical therapy. I'm so thrilled to introduce our guest, Dr. Michael Kay, Doctor of Physical Therapy, who's really been making waves in the golf industry for a long time. When I was playing professionally, I was always trying to find a way to get ahead and was following Dr. Kay, and I would do a lot of his exercises, which helped keep me out of pain and helped keep me dialed when I was playing on tour. Dr. Kay is a founder of K Performance Physio in Scottsdale, Arizona, as well as Helix Golf, where he combines cutting-edge physical therapy techniques with performance training to help golfers at all levels improve their game. His client list reads like a who's who of professional sports. He's got athletes from PGA Tour, LPGA Tour, MLB, NFL, UFC, you name it. What sets Dr. Kay apart is his innovative approach to golf performance. He's not just treating injuries, he's really revolutionizing how we think about the golf swing, movement patterns, and the body's potential. Whether you're a weekend warrior or looking to compete professionally and trying to make it on tour, this episode is going to be packed with insights that can hopefully help transform your game. So grab your notepads. I'm excited to get started with this. Dr. Kay, thank you so much for being on here with us today.
Thanks. You should be here. Thanks, Landon. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just curious, how did you get into physical therapy? Like I'm always curious of people's journey into that world. So how'd you get into it?
Yeah, I guess like the typical answer, and it feels like this is what everyone said in when I was at PT school with other people. They had some like horrific injury or thing they had to rehab, and frankly, I didn't deal with any injury stuff. Always been, knock on wood, pretty healthy from like an orthopedic perspective. So I just always loved sports, fascinated by movement, those sort of things. I played baseball, play all the sports, kind of more apt and enjoyed and was better at the rotational sport thing, just from kind of who I am and what I did. So I like throwing things hard and I like doing that. That was always kind of where I was fascinated by. And then when I got to college, it was kind of, I decided what to do. I was kind of a reader. I did a bunch of things. And so, everyone's like, you should go to law school, right? And the fact that I was kind of a jerk, not a jerk, but I like to argue with people. kind of an asshole with a smile. It's kind of, so they're like, you should go to law school. So then I clerked. I was about to go to law school and realized it wasn't what I wanted to do at all. And this is kind of those things. I was like, wow, that's a lot of paperwork. You don't just get to argue with people all day. It's a lot of paperwork that goes into it. So the quality of life was not what I was hoping for. So I went back to school and then took prereqs. I was like, I really like this physical activity thing, and ended up getting into PT school from there. So it's kind of like that was just my journey into PT school. It wasn't necessarily like brought about by like any rehab stint or anything like that, but it was maybe more from like a biomechanics, interested in movement, and all of a sudden I'm like 22, 23, I'm like, shit, I got to figure out what I'm going to do. I
feel you.
So that was about it.
I feel you. So your interest in like the biomechanics, interest in the movement, interest in rotational sports, is that what kind of led you towards trying to get into kind of golf being one of your specialties, or did that just kind of happen?
Yeah, I think when you get done, especially get done in college, I was done playing baseball, and you're looking for what are you going to do next from like a activity perspective. So I had a brother my younger brother's a really good player. So I started playing golf with him and I was like, wow, this is fun, right? There's a lot of intricacies here. And so I just kind of dove into it. I knew I wanted to work more in more of like a sport environment. So like, it was kind of like, all right, what do I know? What am I good at? And that's kind of, I guess, if you work with me, I think, not to pat myself on the back, one of my skill set is that I'm good at like explaining a sense or a feel to a rotational athlete. So I think that's an important characteristic of anyone who does this, is being able to not necessarily give them the exercise and the drill and all this stuff. It's like, but there is like the right word or the right like sensation or motion that can translate to them. So that's kind of where I got there.
Absolutely. And that actually leads me perfectly into like kind of the meat of what I wanted to talk about, because I played professional golf for about 10 years. I started coaching over the last 2 or 3 years, and I've always been interested in how do we kind of like hack the nervous system? How do we get people to change their motor patterns more quickly? because I watch people on the range and we don't do it with any feedback, no cues or nothing. It takes forever. It never really changes. But where I've found the most success is when I partner with a physical therapist and we're able to actually like go in and change those motor patterns where we can have like a sensation with no golf club in our hand. But how do we kind of explain that sense or feel that allows people to get like a little bit more rotation or a little bit more kind of how we want to. So in terms of like the way that you help describe these feelings to people, what is kind of like when you first interact with somebody, a client comes to you and they say, hey, I really want some help on getting more of a load, more of a turn into my trail side on my in my golf swing. What is kind of your process or your pattern of analyzing what they do, where are their limitations, and then how do you kind of go about fixing them?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone, I guess, so you gotta look at them as a shape or like an individual, right? Like so was lucky enough to be mentored under a guy named Bill Hartman, who's out in Indianapolis, who has, he's got a really great academy that he works with and does, kind of teaching like the movement model. But I was able to be lucky enough to be mentored by him pretty early on in his process of his evolution of changing how he sees movement and being able to describe it. But for like the example of, again, someone who feels like they need to get deeper into the right side in a turn, you're going to look at like the shape of the human, the shape of the individual. You're going to look at how they are currently like applying force down into the ground. And then the nice thing about this is you don't need crazy bells and whistles and all of the, like I've got force plates, but they should be conformational. It should be like, holy shit, I never realized that actually happened. Yeah. So, it's like, simple movement screen, simple tests. So, you can take any, I don't care what screen anyone does, you can take it and I can read certain information to it and you can read certain information into it. I think from my movement model lens that I see it from, it's like, it's going to tell me pretty quickly what space and shapes you might have access to. So not necessarily like a excursion of a joint, but more of like, what's the shape that you can actually, what shape can you create to make the most efficient type of swing for your body at the first?
Very interesting. So like what kind of shape does everyone that just have naturally? So I was listening to a couple of your podcasts, and you have a couple of different generalizations to kind of describe how somebody is going to move. I think you said it was a kangaroo and a gorilla. Kind of have somebody who's a little bit more springy, kind of like me. I'm skinny, springy guy, and then someone who's built a little bit bigger. So are you going about training these people differently? Like how are you kind of tackling those two general distinctions?
Yeah, so you're gonna by the shape of someone, you're gonna basically be able to get an idea of what their bias might be, right? So like the Olympics is such a great example of like, if you watch through the Olympic Village, right? It's like, you can just be like sprinter, gymnast, power lifter, right? Like swimmer, right? Like these shapes are like, when you get to this very specific, that degree of a specific skill set, you get a lot of very specific shapes that match the skill set, right? Like, there's no way your accountant is going to be a basketball player. They're going to be shaped a certain way, right? So knowing someone, looking at someone and getting an idea of what their shape is, it's going to tell you their ability and what they're going to have access to from like how they're going to put force down the ground. So like the example, like you take like, you got John Rahm on one end, you got Justin Thomas on the other end, right? And a lot of everyone else in between. Mm-hmm. You could probably find further levels, further degrees of like the different ends of spectrum, right? So knowing that, you got Justin Thomas, and he's going to probably have more access to like what we call like external rotation in space than someone like John Rahm, who's not necessarily going to have the access to the ER space, but he's going to have much more access to like downforce and an internal rotation. So like one's going to be more like Justin Thomas, going to be more inhale biased, and then someone like John Rahm is going to be more exhale biased, closer to the ground, the other thing. So and then again, it ain't all black or white. There's a huge spectrum,
of course,
between everything else, right? But then you just start overlaying like, club path, hand path, and all these guys, and it's gonna start to match very commonly with their shape, and because it's essentially just they're moving on the most advantageous positions to the structure of their body.
For sure. And I find like a partnership between physical therapist and golf coach so interesting because you mentioned these things and I'm just thinking of, okay, how's John Rahm getting set up? He's arms are closer to the body, a little bit more squatty, hand path a little bit more to the left, producing a little bit more of a fade. And then Justin Thomas tends to, he struggles when he gets it a little bit too far under and out to the right. And he works more kind of in that pattern. So if somebody was starting out, there's like a kind of one of my goals for this podcast is to answer the question of how would somebody go from scratch, from nothing, scratch to scratch. So how would they start from brand new and end up being a scratch golfer? And I think understanding kind of what you're talking about, what is your shape? What do you already have access to? Like, let's not try to go and climb up to the top of the tree and get the highest hanging fruits. Let's get like what we can kind of have down here. So from like a more of like a motor pattern type frame of mind, how would you start to answer that question of how would you take somebody from scratch and start them on the path of training in the right way? And how would you start them, like on this physical journey of being a fantastic golfer?
Yeah, I mean, I think, without, I guess, getting the specific person, right?
Right.
When you right, I mean, because if you've got a 5-year-old versus, a 25-year-old versus a 40-year-old, right? It's gonna look quite different. Like the 5-year-old, I'd want them to experience as much variety and variability as possible early on. Right? I want them to be able to roll around. I'd want them to do like, crawl, all these sort of things. There's all these different. They're all accommodating different positions that's going to be required in different varieties of golf, right? Because that's the thing about golf, right? It's like, it's like the most open environment game there is, right? It's like, I may be creating a max effort as hard as I can moment, and then I got to walk for fucking 5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to hit the softest little shot possible. So like that degree of requirement is, pretty large, right? So like your newbie, like it's really like they need to accumulate as many reps as possible, and starting to sequence and understand where the club face is, where the club end of this club is for that, right? So like, I mean, like there's probably a fair amount of them just trialing and error, because they just don't have the spatial sensory map that someone who's played for a long time have.
Right. That's it. Sorry. So that's interesting. So rolling around, doing things that are variable, not even making golf swings in the gym, but just getting them to understand their body a little bit more. Like, how do we move around in space? How do we stop? How do we go? How do we jump? How do we roll? How do we do all these things? So that's one thing that I always like about your Instagram content is that, you said this, I think I was looking at your Substack the other day, and you were talking about how, if somebody can do like a reverse lunge or reverse curtsy lunge, I believe, and they can stand up, they should be able to make a perfect backswing. And so a lot of people see golf specific training as like, okay, I need to grab a weighted club and make golf swing motions, when kind of in reality, we just need the body to move a little bit differently. So I think that's fascinating. So let's just say you were talking to a 35-year-old person who kind of works at a desk. They kind of have their, the normal kind of slumped shoulders, and they're lacking a little bit of rotation. I saw you just did a post on thoracic rotation, so it's a little apropos. But for this person who's, your normal person, not a crazy athlete, how would you start them getting kind of unlocking some of their potential speed? I know you're doing a speed development program, so how would you start with that person to start building up some ability to create speed safely?
Yeah, I think that's because most of the people will tell you that, and this is very common from a physical therapy perspective and a training perspective, they'll say this 35-year-old needs to increase his strength capacity, right? Like he needs to get stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
He needs to strengthen his glutes, activate all these sort of things. I think that's kind of a really really dangerous way of thinking about this stuff, because if in order to increase my strength, in order to get stronger in the gym, all these things, what you end up doing, and the only really way to do it, is I have to start to lock things together, right? You'll end up you're going to take away some of the range of motion that you might have access to, right? So what I would probably do with someone that's like this at first is I would get them on a foam roller. I would roll them around a bunch. I would do these things. I would do exercises that are going to be able to get them to recapture enough relative range of motion that they might have, so that then when we go then to like maybe start squeezing stuff, start to like strength train, develop all these sort of things, at least now we're going to do it from the right sequence of things, right? So if I just get stronger and stronger, right, like it's not going to improve your easy ability to move, right? And a lot of those people who sit at a desk all day, we have to recapture that first. Then we can then start building layers on top of it.
Definitely. And that's something that I noticed, at least when I was competing professionally. I always had this little ego part of me being like, oh, you got to start lifting more weights. You got to lift more weights. Like people are lifting more weights than you. They're going to be stronger. They're going to play better. And I always noticed that I started to get hurt more. I didn't play as well. And when I took the time to do a lot more of the mobility based stuff, kind of how do I elongate everything? How do I do some fascial things, some eldoas? That's really where my swing speed jumped up. I went up from like 110 to 120 and didn't even touch a weight, just by getting the body to work a little bit more efficiently. So I think that's definitely something that's important for people to know. There's a minimum strength requirement for sure, but swinging a golf club isn't that hard physically. If you the repeated motion of it, I feel like that's where we get into trouble. But anybody can grab a club and swing it. So we don't need this crazy strength component with it.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, like the force that's actually being accrued in like 120 mile an hour club head speed swing, right? Like you can't control that anyways, right? Nor would you want, right? Like it's not like if I get stronger wrists, it's going to help me hold my wrist angle towards. If you're feeling like you've got a grip and do that in order to control the club face, you're bringing a force production problem to something that's more of like an efficiency or mechanical multiplier. Like I want the mechanical multiplier. I want the hub on the wheel. I don't want you to have to produce more force in order to create more speed. That's just such a it's the completely wrong way to go about it. You can get away with it for sure. Then there's players at the highest level who make a lot of money bringing force production to things all over and over again. But then let's look at their longevity is like. Let's look at they go missing for 3 or 4 months. Why can't this guy putt anymore? Like we don't have putting this all together. So I think there's no free lunch, right? It's like, what am I always giving up in a game that I want the widest amount of variability in it too, right? It's not
absolutely
on 20 mile club head speed. It's not healthy to throw 100 miles an hour. Like we're giving something up when we do.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you see, the amount of Tommy Johns has really spiked, but people are throwing so hard. I couldn't possibly imagine just.
Scary, huh?
Yeah, it's like the 7th inning, and all of a sudden every single person's throwing 102, 103.
Yeah, these back end bullpen guys have and they have a secondary pitch too. It's crazy.
It's nuts. You said something very interesting there. You said mechanical multiplier. My hair kind of spiked up because I'm like that kind of turned me on a little bit. But say more about like what a mechanical multiplier is kind of in relation to the golf swing, and then what are some examples of them?
Yeah, so I think of it being like you think about the spoke or the hub on a wheel, like the outside of the wheel. I want the outside of the wheel to be going the fastest, right? It's like you think about like from my literally my insides from like my guts to my rib cage, the outside. Like as I'm swinging, I want these things to. There's a component of where the deep stuff stops and the outside moves, and it becomes this like mechanical multiplier. It's an efficiency sequence thing. Right. I'm looking for that from people versus them trying to push harder to create more speed. And so, but in order for me to create this like mechanical multiplier, I need relative motion from like proximal. I need you to come up. I need you to go away from me at the same time. Right. So it's like, you need both ends of it. So like good example would be like, instead of me doing like everyone thinks they're getting stuck on their left side, right? So they need to spin their left side open harder in order to get the club to kick out and come around, right? And then, their thoughts, all right, then it puts me in like the right amount of right side bend and it allows the club shallow, et cetera, right? I would argue that 99% of the people that you see that have to bounce their left foot out at impact and have their hips fly open and they've got this crazy differential at impact, the reason they have to do that is because they didn't create enough efficiency early in their swing. So they didn't get their guts up. They didn't get energy traveling from the ground up effectively. So then when they don't have that, they're not able to unweight effectively. So then now I've got to do all this other extra stuff now to get out of the way because I'm going to feel stuck if I don't get out of it. Your left hip should clear by itself. I've never given not in the last 2 years, have I given a cue to someone to spin their left hip over. I think because it's just, but it's really common, and it can like, don't get me wrong, this can increase speed and all this sort of thing. But again, at what cost? Like, how do you control the face? I mean, then you get clubs get stuck underneath guys, and now I have to jump and throw harder. So now it's just more force. I need more force. I need more force. I need more force, and earlier and earlier and earlier in order to get the club to kick back around to square back up.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because and then that kind of goes counter to the mechanical multiplier. If you keep on having to add more and more force, we're not maximizing the efficiency. We're not maximizing the ability to generate that speed with the proper sequencing. So with the proper sequencing, kind of, at least my understanding, it's the correct timing of acceleration and deceleration, kind of relatively close to.
Yeah. And if you if you break it down to simply as walking, right? Like your early backswing is me stepping forward with my right foot. My foot hits the ground, and then my left foot starts to pass out in front of me. That would be getting me just basically to the top of the backswing. My left foot lands, that gets me back to left arm parallel, and then it's, then my right side passes back out in front of me, and you just let it eat. But that's like the phases of gait, how they match up with the golf swing. When I walk in, taking a step and flinging my left side open to get my right side past me, right? It's like one side got to slow down so the other side can pass in front of me. That's how I get a mechanical multiplier without trying to spike some anterior posterior shear force on the left side and bang my toe in the front of my foot all the time.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I think that's fantastic right there. And that's kind of where I try to base my teaching around and say, hey, how can we do this as simply as possible? You already have the ability to walk. You know how to take the step, you know how to decelerate, you know how to accelerate. And then it's just like, how do we just get you to transfer that into the golf swing? It's
when you look at like the actual real relative like motions, when you look at gear stuff and what a touring pro that's been on tour for 12 years and maybe has won a couple times, their actual motion, what they're actually doing, they're doing way less than the majority of people who either are they're a flash in a pan on the tour, or they're just not great players, like your amateur stuff, right? They're doing less. It just becomes difficult when you add in the speed and the rate of these things, right? Like it makes it incredibly complex. But and the majority is like the degrees of what a pro and what you see on Instagram people trying to do with their rib cages and getting open at impact are doing. It's not a reality of what the best ball strikers are doing over and over.
No, I always think it's so interesting. You look at the best ball strikers of all time. I have Sam Snead on my phone because I'm kind of a nerd. But when he's at impact, I mean, his clavicles are down, centered. He's at the ball. Hips are a little bit open, but the chest isn't 50 degrees open. So you see kind of everyone on Instagram trying to get kind of one of those looks, trying to get their head open. Yeah, exactly.
But that becomes a necessity when I take the club away and I just jam into the front of my right foot instantly, right? Now I don't get my guts up. Now the center mass and everything is forward on front of me. So now I never got any mechanical advantage early.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing I can do now is just try to swing this water bag left as hard as I can, right? But then every person I've ever seen that has this swing style, they walk in, they've got banana feet. They've got a neck that looks like this, right? So it's like, and unfortunately, you can teach a 14-year-old to do this really well because they're really bendy, right? Because they're going to create a lot of downforce with that. But then you've started the clock on their golf. It's running fast now, right? They're not going to have those bends and twists at 22 that they have at 14. So how many guys do you see that are like, I was 17, 18 years old. I had more club head speed than I do at 22, 23. So they get into a gym program that crushes them. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, like you stop lifting to the degree that you were lifting, right? I mean, no offense, like you and me, I'm never going to be a good deadlifter. I just don't have the problem. It's cool. I came to terms with it, right? I turn pretty well, right? I can hold some right foot and I can, and I bounce pretty well. So, but a trap bar deadlift, it's a stupid exercise for someone that looks like on the majority.
Thank you. You're the
There's
first
a lot of
person.
other options.
Thank you.
People get very emotionally charged to certain exercises because there's the model like I've got a hinge, I've got a squat, I've got a push, I got to pull. That's bullshit. That's just like you need to do things in certain directions that are going to benefit you. But if you put me on a trap bar deadlift program, I'm going to pin my sacral base to the backside of myself. And then once I pin my sacral base to the top part of my sacrum, I lose my ability to turn. You lose your ability to turn. If you can't turn, how are you going to create speed? You can't side bend enough to do it. So that's probably why you shouldn't say trap bar deadlift.
Dude, okay, so I was going to this trainer and he like didn't really have the most knowledge. I was kind of a little bit younger, a little bit naive. And he's just like, oh, you're a professional golfer. We got to get you deadlifting. So I was like, trap bar deadlifting like 300 pounds and then herniated my disc and I was out for like a year. Yeah. And it's just, I'm like, dude, this is so dumb. This is not built for me. So I'm so happy that you said that.
You'd be a good goblet squatter. Like
right.
You front rack you goblet you, maybe he'll elevate. We can do like kettlebell cleans with you, but sustained IR to pressure. So like position you'd have to get into to pick up a trap bar and be good at. John Rahm is going to be good at it. Justin Thomas is never going to be good at it. But we just have to check these boxes because we've been told by other people a hinge pattern is important. Well, in like what context and how are you doing it too, right?
For sure. And I think this is one of the things that makes you so interesting. And I really enjoyed kind of watching, your teaching evolving. I've followed you on Instagram for like 7 or 8 years. So is that disagreeable nature the one that you hinted at about the reason why you like kind of being a lawyer or wanted to be a lawyer? Because you're not afraid to buck against the trends that go on now. And when you were at PFS, you were the director of education, correct? That was one of your titles there. So what are some things that you feel like the medical world or the PT world gets wrong, at least in terms of golf, other than the trap bar deadlift? And what are some things that you have been finding interesting recently?
I mean, I think it's really underestimated what you do in the gym and how it relates to like how it could be causing interference to what you're trying to do from a movement or like a sporting environment way, right? Like I don't think there's a big misunderstanding of how like we actually turn, right? I think like, in order for me to turn back to the right, I need to create expansive space behind my right rib cage, right? I need to expand my front left, back right. That creates a turn. Okay. So then, for example, put a dowel or a golf club behind my shoulders and tell me to rotate back to the right. If I pin my arm back behind me here, right, and I try to turn, I put my shoulder blade right behind my back, my right side of my rib cage. I ain't turning right. I'm turning right, but I'm not turning right.
I'm stuck.
You can't. So that's why, so if you're going to test thoracic rotation with your arms behind your head, like what are we actually testing? You're probably testing more of like ability to like left IR side bend, and you might be getting some like right lower rib cage expansion, but you're not getting any upper D like T2 to T7 expansion because the scap is pinned to it, so it's pushing you forward. So what does a lot of people do when they take the club away? They straight arm it and they go forward right away. Because they put a block behind the right side right away. So like maybe from a golf swing perspective, like the amount of like people who are trying to create early width, I think that's a big mistake. Not that you don't want width, but it's time and place in the right part of the golf swing. So if I straighten my arms, what I've instantly done then is I've turned my spine into one piece. And I'm going to turn, but then is this turn a relative motion turn or is it just a spine that I lock together? Now it's like what Bill would say in my mentor. It's like now you're just bamboo pulling the spine in order to get to that place.
Bamboo pulling. I like that. And I see that all the time. And it's this way I think every golf instructor, if there's any golf instructors listening to this, find a really good PT and become friends with them. Bring them some coffee, bring them some beef jerky, and talk to them about these kinds of things. That's so interesting. I see that all the time on the range, but I don't have such an understanding of kind of those things going together. Because now when you keep your arm straight, boom, bamboo, everything kind of drops down and falls. That makes total sense. Because kind of what my golf swing mentor, we talk about is a narrow kind of P1 to P2. So takeaway to set up the takeaway. And then from takeaway to the top, that's where you get the width. And so like as I do that, I can kind of feel what you're talking about, the expansion of the right side of the rib. And then you say contraction of the left side of the rib, or how?
So like your front left's going to expand. So like your pump handle on your left side will expand, and then you'll get a back right side expansion. So you're going to go to where there's space. You got to create space to move into a certain direction.
For sure.
Exists, right? So
for sure. And yeah, and that's so interesting. And so it makes sense, like, back when I was first learning how to play, everybody wanted to get set up like Adam Scott, where everyone had the straight spine and kind of like arched back, and no one really had the ability to be able to expand. You were already stuck there in expansion. So is that one of the cues that you would give to some of your players if they came to you, if they wanted to get a little bit more, gears would measure it as shoulder rotation or whatever, but it's more of an expansion of the trail side of your body than it is turn.
Yeah, I would look at it. So myself and Chris Waukee and Tony Greco, my two other partners, like the amount that we work from literally like stepping into set up to the shot to the first 3 inches of takeaway off the ball, that's like 90% of what I do. Because it's like once your hands leave your base of support on the right side, like the bullet's out of the gun. Like it's the direction's kind of like, and of course you can tweak and change things, and there's styles and stuff, but like if I can't get you, I got to get you in a setup position that is going to be the most advantageous to this early part of this takeaway. And it's, the way I would typically cue it or do it is like, it'd be just like a walking gait type of phase thing. Like how can I get you to step in with your right foot and be behind your right foot as you move into this thing to address the ball. So the majority of people that you see on your lesson tee have never really had like, so this is my, so my foot, right, and my shin, they live their life with their shin in front of their heel. So their heel's almost always off the ground, right? Early part of gait phase of gait is like, I need a shin that's behind my heel so that I can apply pressure, the foot can land, then I get force coming back up. Now I have this nice efficiency of back and forth. So essentially what I'm going to try to do with a lot of people is, in my first couple times working them, is I need them to be able to create a right heel contact to step into the shot so that they can move into it. Now they're applying downforce that's coming straight back up to them, because we make this huge ass assumption that if I'm at setup and I'm looking straight down the ball, that forward is where the ball is. But the majority of people, that's not where forward is. Forward is somewhere way over to the right. So as soon as they move, they're going to where forward is.
Interesting.
Their sacrum, so the rudder of their body, for them to actually square this thing off the ball, 90% of people you see every day can't actually do that. They've got a sacrum that's facing somewhere to the right, but they're not going to live life this way. So they shrink back over here. But as soon as they move, it goes. And now they have no idea what early takeaway feels like. It's just gone.
That's fascinating. And this really like hits on, so on my last podcast, I had Stephen Yellen, who's a sports psychologist. And when he was talking about, he said something interesting. He said the quality of the space before the motion determines the quality of the motion.
That couldn't be better said.
And I just sat there and I'm like, my goodness.
And space here, right? My ER space, right? And then my space in my body, all these sort of things, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting. The more people that I talk to, we all kind of get to the same point. They're coming from completely different ways, where it's the first part of the swing is the 90% of it. And then kind of how your mindset is walking into it determines your ability to access it. Kind of in a more like,
yeah. So this is relative motion. This is action impulse, right? I'm going to create an action, and I want space between my resultant motion, right? Like I need time and space between these two things, right? So if I set up and I don't have my trigger and it's like, the golf club's gone, the guy's spun already, he's out of it, right? That's a person who doesn't have any space between the action and the actual motion, right? So it's like, so that person to me tells you right away, they just don't have any relative motion. So time to them doesn't exist there.
Right.
So like a negative tibia to a vertical tibia doesn't exist to them, right? So you really have to literally retrain these spatial temporal, times in their brain.
Right. Yeah. So you're retraining the time. And then we know when people have a better kind of state of mind, they have a little bit more silence, a little bit more stillness, they're
Yeah,
able to
things slow, right?
perceive. Yeah, they're able to perceive
When you
time.
have relative motion, when I can move my foot relative to my shin, relative to my knee, relative to my hip, then time doesn't feel like it's just a blink. It's actually I can actually push through this. Then when I get to the top of the swing, stuff can lock together appropriately and I unwind at the right time. And it's like, you know, everyone talks about impact stuff, right? And the greats always talk about impact, but the reason they can talk about impact is they have their time conception of impact is way different than mine. Maybe not yours, but mine for sure. But it's but because they have much more control of the system that's moving on. They've got more time between impulses.
For sure. And then having more time between impulses allows you to have the mechanical multiplier
Yeah, that's
increases.
it. I don't need to push harder. I just push the right amount. Because that I guess not a quick tangent, but like the everyone's looking to try to sense or feel something. They're like, I need more turn, I need more stretch, and that's just a losing proposition because literally this constraint structure that I've created on this right side is twisting away from me. So then I wake up tomorrow, maybe today it was like this, tomorrow it's like this, and now it's like this, and you're like, damn, that feel I had 3 days ago, I can't find it at all. Well, you can't find it anymore because now your right hip is behind you. You've literally changed the structure over a period of time. So like I would try to do very often is when you regain relative motion, that's the challenging thing about it. It feels like nothing. It feels like literally nothing. But that's some of the best swings people make repeatedly is like the efficiency is so high that their effort is really feels low. But then you look down at the TrackMan or you look down and you're like, holy shit, that's going just as far as if my hard effort one was before, right? So that's the mechanical multiplier. That's swinging with relative motion.
Oh, for sure. And to continue on your little tangent, I was working with my old fitness trainer down here in Miami. We were trading. I would give him golf lessons, and he would train me. And so he's a great golfer, like +1 or +2 handicap, swings it really fast, like 125, 127, and he's just springy and just murders it. And he looks like he's swinging 120% every single time. I'm like, Ryan, do me a favor. Swing 120%. Let's see. It was like 126 club head speed. I'm like, now swing 100. It was 127. I was like, now swing 180. It was 129. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, there you go. That's the real life example of that mechanical multiplier, the trying less hard. It's like that scene from Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where he's like learning how to surf, and like the surf instructor is like try no, do less. You're doing way too much. Do less.
Yeah. Well, that is it. It's like, a lot of these, and that's kind of some of the challenging, some of the, like the exercise I might give someone is like, and I'll tell them like, all right, we've got foot contacts. So I need you to be able to feel this in your foot, right? I don't want you to just go hunt for a stretch in your rib cage. I need the foot thing, right? And then what they find out after doing this for a couple of weeks, if they stick with it, is like there's a lot of more nuance involved in what they're feeling in their foot. Whether it's a water bag we give them or something at first, that's like they're just splashing the water all over. 3 weeks later, it's like, wow, can you see how you're actually like turning this water? They're like, yeah, I can feel it. I can hear it. All this. Now you're collecting more like sensory information, which makes the rotor pattern more robust, right? That's over time. That's how you end up learning something. But at first, it's like, I can't feel or see or understand anything. It's like coaching too, right? It's like you look at someone's swing, you're like, and then then you're into a couple of years, you're like, all right, boom, boom, I can see that stuff really quickly. But you just have to become like hip to it. Yep.
Oh, for sure. No, when I first started coaching, I was like, let's get on the golf course. Let's do some free shot routine stuff.
Well, it's a good place to start.
No, for sure. And so, we had a couple more minutes here. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. So if you were somebody who was going to say, I'm building a home gym. Okay. I got some cash laying around. I want to build some home gym. What are some tools you mentioned the water bag a couple of times. What are some tools that you would suggest that somebody puts in their home gym if they're looking to get better at golf and be able to have better relative motion, be able to understand their body a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty simple. I mean, I think you can get away with, kettlebells, a couple dumbbells, like a variation of like whatever squat rack you could fit. Like I like some of the, depending on like your strength and size and if you want to lift, but like I like any of like the safety bar stuff. I would rarely put a bar behind any rotational athletes on their back, like a straight bar. I'm probably going to get hate because people think that's weak, but it's just like the only way I get good at that is literally stop myself from turning. Like,
Right.
Just doesn't make that to me. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. It's not that there's not a time and place, but rarely. kettlebells, dumbbells. I mean, I like foam rolling a lot. I used to
Hmm.
hate rolling 7 years ago or so, but I've kind of changed my thought process on it and the usefulness of it versus the way I thought about it before. And that's kind of it. I don't think you need a flywheel. I don't think you need these like really expensive different weight training like implements. I think they could be cool and they could be useful, but for like where you're starting, most of the time I think you can get away with uh, kind of just very simple setup.
And those water bags, you using those a decent amount? I've seen them. I've yet to use one. I've been curious about them.
I do, yeah. Use it for like if you think about like the inside of the bag, you get the outside of the bag, you get the inside of this water, right? So I'm using it not to like create more stability or like perturb the motor system. It's more like just learning to understand like that stuff that's moving inside of that water bag is very representative of what's happening inside of you. So if I can actually like if I can coordinate the water would be the similar thing as me coordinating my guts inside of it. And that's what the best, most efficient people do repeatedly is that they can coordinate their internal forces the best, right? Like the best jumpers in the world are the best at keeping their guts off of their pelvic floor up in the air because you can only literally go where your guts go.
Right.
I can tell you where you're going, right? So that's why your accountant can't jump, but they're good at sitting because they got a big wide ass. And they could sit down on the chair front. Sitting's hard, right? And your high jumper would be a terrible sitter because they've got the degree of the shape of their pelvis and where they're going to be. But they're really good at making an impulse and getting their guts off their pelvic floor. So
I love this. I think you're the only person I've ever heard kind of describe the guts in this way but it's so true, man. I mean, it's like the breathing, the ability to like control the insides. It's just
that impulse is massive. Like, I mean, I like credit to my mentor, Bill Hartman. That was his. But if you watch some of these scans of people and like the live CTs or whatever, you can see it, and it gets sped up. But like literally, you can see the pistoning of the guts, and the bones bending in order to accommodate these sort of things. I think we take for granted how dynamic the inside of what's going on. And if you think about if I could take my liver and impulse it, like what that creates from like the mechanical advantage from an inside out force production capabilities, that's why it's powerful. So it ain't all about muscle. It's about being in the right place at the right time with the right forces.
yeah, no, for sure. Dude, this has been so enlightening. Just being able to understand kind of how, understand the shape of your body, kind of what are the things, just like it as a wrap up, understanding the shape of your body and what things you can and can't do. So if anybody is looking for a PT or looking for a trainer, making sure that that's what the trainer is looking at first, making sure that you're moving the way that your body was designed to move. And in doing that, we can then create mechanical multipliers, which can then allow us to try less hard and swing the club faster and be able to get better results. And that comes from being able to have better relative motion in our body. So being able to increase the areas that are a little bit tight, be able to get the fascia to stretch out a little bit more through some foam rolling and through some body work, and then being able to have your body understand where it is in space a little bit better. And I think that would kind of help everybody get better at going from scratch to scratch. So how do you get this better understanding of your body, better understanding of yourself to then produce better results? Dr. K, before I let you out of here, is there anything else that you have been finding interesting recently? Anything that you want to talk about? Anything that you want to pitch or promote?
So I mean, I've got with my partners Tony Greco and Chris Waukee, I have called the Helix Golf Institute. We're kind of based out in Marietta, but moving around a bit. But we're putting stuff together, online lessons, all these sort of things. So you can reach out on our website.
What's that website?
HelixGolfInstitute.com. I have a Substack with another PT buddy of mine, Mike Camperini. It's called Context Driven on Substack. So we do weekly posts on there where we deep dive. Usually it's a case study of something, depending on what. I think Mike did something the last couple of weeks on like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, rehabbing someone with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu thing. I'm kind of currently doing like a golf swing mechanics, where the guts are depending on where the club is type of thing right now. So
That's cool.
It's kind of nerdy, kind of fun. And then we're putting together with Helix Golf, we're putting together a speed development program that's going to be like body related, and then and then with the idea of like how do we implement this onto a golf course. So that's going to be hopefully coming in the next month or so.
Well, that's awesome. I can't wait for the speed development program. I'm gonna sign up for it for sure. I'm gonna be on Helix Golf Institute. 'Cause, I mean, there's so much of this that just is so fascinating, and I love the way that you go about learning this stuff, and I love your passion and your desire to keep on learning and keep on wanting to question the status quo, and don't just take everything that you hear at face value. I think that's a great quality that you have.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that was episode 15 of the Connected Instructor podcast.
Thanks, Landon.
Thank you very much.